Lieutenant Commander Kate Morrison had survived 18 years in the Navy without breaking. 2 combat deployments, 1,400 flight hours, 3 commendations for valor. But standing in Admiral Richard Hawthorne's office at Naval Air Station Oceana, watching him tap his pen against her service record, she felt something inside her begin to crack. "Your performance review is adequate," Hawthorne said, not looking up. The word hung in the air like an insult. Behind him, the Virginia coastline stretched gray and endless through floor-to-ceiling windows. Kate kept her spine straight. "Sir, I've exceeded every metric in my squadron. That's not the issue." He finally met her eyes. At 62, Hawthorne had the kind of face that seemed carved from old disappointments. The issue was fit, culture. This base is preparing to host the most important joint training exercise we've run in a decade. SEAL team operators, Marine Recon, Air Force Special Tactics. The best of the best. And I need officers who understand how to work in that environment. I've worked joint operations before, Admiral. Have you? He leaned back. Because what I'm hearing from other commanders is that you difficult, uncompromising, that you don't understand the importance of cohesion. The words landed like physical blows. Kate had heard variations of this her entire career. Too intense. Too focused. Doesn't smile enough. Doesn't make the other pilots comfortable. The kind of criticism that somehow never appeared in her male colleagues' reviews, no matter how aggressive or demanding they were. "With respect, sir, I complete every mission assigned to me. This isn't about missions." Hawthorne stood, and the gesture felt final. "I'm reassigning you. Effective immediately, you'll be transferring to administrative duties at the recruiting office in Richmond. Someone will be in touch about the details." The room tilted. "Sir, that's an order, Lieutenant Commander." His voice hardened. "You have 48 hours to clear your quarters and remove yourself from this base. Dismissed." Kate saluted, her hand steady even as her world collapsed. She walked out of that office with her head high, past the administrative assistants who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the bulletin board announcing the upcoming training exercise she'd never be part of. She made it all the way to the parking lot before she had to stop, hand pressed against her truck, breathing hard. 18 years. Gone in a 10-minute conversation. Her phone buzzed. A text from her squadron mate, Lieutenant Paul Henderson. Heard what happened. "That's rough. But honestly, Kate, maybe it's for the best. You know how you can be." She deleted it without responding. The apartment she'd rented in Virginia Beach felt hollow when she returned. Kate had never been good at decorating, at making spaces feel like home. There were framed photos from her academy days, a bookshelf full of technical manuals and historical biographies, a coffee maker that got more use than anything else in the kitchen. She sat at her small dining table and pulled out her laptop, staring at the screen without seeing it. Administrative duties. Recruiting office. It was career death, and they both knew it. Officers who got shunted to positions like that rarely came back. The Navy had a way of making people disappear without officially ending their careers. Her father would have told her to fight. Colonel Daniel Morrison, Army, retired, had spent 30 years teaching her that you never backed down, never gave up, never let them see you break. But her father had been gone for 5 years now, and Kate had learned that some battles couldn't be won through sheer determination. She opened her email and found the official reassignment letter already waiting. Reading it made everything worse. The language was bureaucratic and cold, reducing 18 years of service to a few paragraphs of administrative necessity. That night, Kate didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction she'd had with Hawthorne, with her squadron mates, with every superior officer who'd ever looked at her with that particular expression of disappointment. What had she done wrong? Been too good at her job? Expected the same standards from others that she held herself to? By morning, she'd made her decision. She would clear out her office, pack her quarters, and leave with dignity. No arguments. No appeals. She'd give them exactly what they wanted, her absence. The base felt different when she drove through the gates that final morning. Or maybe she was different, seeing it now as a place she no longer belonged. She parked near the squadron building and walked inside, already feeling like a ghost. Her squadron commander, Commander Beth Sullivan, was waiting by her office door. "Kate," Beth said quietly, "I tried to push back on this. I want you to know that. I appreciate it, ma'am. You're one of the best pilots I've ever served with. It's wrong." Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They stood there for a moment, two women who'd navigated the same impossible currents, and then Beth squeezed her shoulder and walked away. Inside her office, Kate began packing. Photos, commendations, books, the small model F-18 a grateful trainee had given her years ago. Each item felt like a piece of her life being boxed away. The intercom crackled. "All personnel, report to the main briefing hall at 1400 hours. Mandatory attendance for the joint training exercise kickoff." Kate glanced at the clock. She had 3 hours. 3 hours before she had to watch everyone else begin the mission she'd never be part of. The just thing would be to skip it, to finish packing and leave quietly. But something stubborn in her refused. She'd earned the right to be here. She'd earned the right to watch, even if she couldn't participate at 1400 hours. Kate Morrison walked into that briefing hall and took a seat in the back row, and waited to see what her sacrifice had bought. The briefing hall filled quickly. Kate watched from her corner seat as officers streamed in, Navy pilots in flight suits, SEAL team operators in their distinctive tactical uniforms, Marine recon personnel moving with that particular swagger that came from years of proving themselves. The energy in the room was electric, the kind of anticipation that came before something important. Admiral Hawthorne took the stage precisely at 1400, accompanied by two other senior officers. One was a Marine colonel named Vincent Marsh, built like a linebacker and carrying himself with barely restrained intensity. The other was Air Force Brigadier General Patricia Vance, whose reputation preceded her, the first woman to command an F-22 Raptor squadron, and someone Kate had admired from a distance for years. "Gentlemen and ladies," Hawthorne began, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "Welcome to Operation Crosswind. Over the next 3 weeks, you'll be participating in the most comprehensive joint training exercise this base has hosted. The goal is simple: perfect integration between air, sea, and ground forces under high-stress combat scenarios." Kate watched as the presentation began, showing aerial reconnaissance footage, mission parameters, threat assessments. It was exactly the kind of operation she'd trained her entire career to execute. The bitterness tasted like copper in her mouth. "Our SEAL teams will be conducting maritime insertion exercises," Hawthorne continued, gesturing to a group of operators in the third row. "Marine recon will handle ground coordination, and our aviators will provide close air support under contested conditions." A hand went up from the SEAL section. A young lieutenant, maybe 30, with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Sir, question about the air support. Are we working with the same pilots who've been stationed here, or are we bringing in outside assets?" "Current squadron personnel," Hawthorne replied. The lieutenant exchanged glances with his teammates. "With respect, sir, some of us have concerns about reliability. We've heard this squadron has had personnel issues." Kate's jaw tightened. Personnel issues. Code for her. Commander Sullivan stood up from her seat near the front. "Lieutenant, this squadron has a perfect mission success rate over the past 18 months. I'm not sure what concerns you're referring to. Just making sure we're working with team players, ma'am. Operators who understand that down there on the ground, we're trusting you with our lives." The implication was clear. Kate felt eyes turning toward her, though most people in the room probably didn't know the specific details of her reassignment. But rumors traveled fast on military bases. General Vance stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed the personnel files for this exercise. Your air support will be more than adequate, Lieutenant. I suggest you focus on your own performance." The SEAL lieutenant nodded, but Kate could see the skepticism on his face and the faces of several others. She'd seen that expression before, the assumption that someone, probably her, had failed to measure up. The briefing continued for another hour, detailing mission scenarios, safety protocols, evaluation criteria. Kate absorbed every word, even though none of it applied to her anymore. When Hawthorne finally dismissed everyone, she remained seated while the hall emptied around her. "Didn't expect to see you here." Kate looked up to find General Vance standing beside her seat. Up close, the general was smaller than she'd appeared on stage. Maybe 5'5", but she carried herself with the kind of presence that made size irrelevant. "I'm clearing out today, ma'am," Kate said. I don't know what I thought. I read your file last night." Vance sat down beside her. 18 years of distinguished service. Exemplary performance ratings. 3 combat deployments with 0 incidents. Then suddenly you're being transferred to a recruiting office in Richmond. Kate said nothing. What was there to say? "I also read between the lines," Vance continued. "I've been doing this long enough to recognize a pattern. You made someone uncomfortable, probably by being better at your job than they expected. Definitely by refusing to play the game. The Admiral made his decision. The Admiral made a mistake." Vance stood. "For what it's worth, Lieutenant Commander, I would have been proud to have you in my squadron. The Air Force's loss is, well, Richmond's gain, I suppose." She walked away, leaving Kate alone in the empty hall. The kindness hurt more than the insults had. That afternoon, Kate finished packing her office. She loaded boxes into her truck, said goodbye to the few squadron mates who bothered to show up, and drove to her quarters to continue the process. By evening, most of her life was compressed into cardboard boxes and duffel bags. She was loading the last box when she heard raised voices from the parking area. Through her window, she could see a cluster of SEAL operators gathered near their vehicles. The young lieutenant from the briefing was there, along with several others, and they were laughing about something. Kate couldn't hear the specific words, but the tone was clear. The mocking edge. The casual dismissiveness. She'd heard it enough times to recognize it instantly. One of the SEALs noticed her watching and said something to the others. They all turned to look, and the lieutenant gave her a theatrical salute that was anything but respectful. More laughter. Kate pulled her curtain closed and sat on her bed, breathing carefully. She'd survived worse than mockery. She'd survived enemy fire, equipment failures, commanders who tried to wash her out of flight school, and the grief of losing her father. She would survive this too. But that night, lying in her empty quarters for the last time, Kate Morrison allowed herself to feel the full weight of the injustice. She'd given the Navy everything: her youth, her health, her relationships, her sense of who she was outside the uniform, and this was how it ended. Not with honor or recognition, but with an admiral's dismissal and a group of young operators who saw her as a punchline. The next morning, she loaded the final boxes into her truck. The sun was just rising over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Kate stood in the parking lot, looking at the flight line where the FA-18s sat ready for their next missions, and felt the loss of it all hit her again. She was starting her truck when her phone rang. An unknown number. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison?" "Speaking." This is Captain Raymond Clark, Pentagon Operations. I'm calling about a personnel matter. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Kate's heart sank. More reassignment details, probably. More bureaucratic necessities. Yes, sir. I'll be brief. Your name came up in a discussion we had yesterday about a specific operational need. I've reviewed your file, and I'd like to speak with you about an opportunity. Can you come to Washington? Kate looked at the base behind her, at the life she was leaving. Sir, I've been reassigned to. I'm aware of your current orders. This would supersede them. I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but I can tell you it involves your ... unique skill set. Are you interested? Something in his tone made her pause. This wasn't standard reassignment bureaucracy. This was something else. Yes, sir. I'm interested. Good. I'll have orders sent to your email within the hour. Report to the Pentagon Monday morning, 0800. Ask for me at the security desk. The line went dead. Kate sat in her truck, staring at her phone, wondering if she'd just imagined the entire conversation. But 20 minutes later, the email arrived. Official orders. Report to Pentagon. Authorization code included. She looked back at the base one more time, then put her truck in gear and drove toward the gate. Whatever was waiting in Washington, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. Thought she had no idea how wrong that assumption would be. The Pentagon on a Monday morning was controlled chaos. Kate navigated security checkpoints with her new orders, following increasingly specific directions through corridors that all looked identical. She'd worn her service dress uniform, every ribbon and insignia perfectly placed. Armor against whatever this meeting would bring. Captain Clark's office was in a section she'd never visited before, down a hallway where the security clearance requirements jumped significantly. The young Marine corporal at the desk checked her credentials twice before waving her through. Clark himself was in his mid-50s, with iron gray hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent serious time in the field. He stood when she entered, and his handshake was firm. Lieutenant Commander Morrison. Thank you for coming on short notice. Sir, your call was unexpected. I imagined so. He gestured to a chair. What I'm about to discuss is classified. Before we continue, I need to confirm your clearance level. They went through the formalities. Kate's clearance was current and sufficient. Clark pulled a folder from his desk. Operation Crosswind. You're familiar with it. I was supposed to be part of it, sir. Before my reassignment. Yes, I read Admiral Hawthorne's report. Very interesting reading. His tone suggested exactly what he thought of that report. Here's what Hawthorne doesn't know. Crosswind isn't just a training exercise. It's an evaluation. The Secretary of Defense has concerns about joint operation effectiveness after several high-profile failures in the field. We need to assess whether our current integration protocols are adequate. Kate listened, not sure where this was going. To do that properly, we need assets in place that can evaluate from inside. We need someone who understands naval aviation, who has joint operation experience, and who has reason to observe rather than participate. He looked at her directly. We need someone who was recently removed from active squadron duty. Understanding hit her. You want me to spy on my own people. I want you to observe and report. There's a difference. Clark opened the folder. We've identified potential weaknesses in how aviators and ground operators communicate under stress. We've seen incidents where personality conflicts or unclear command structures led to mission degradation. Your perspective as someone who's been pushed out would be valuable. You'd see things others might miss. With respect, sir, this feels wrong. Does it feel wrong when operators die because of bad integration? Because that's what we're trying to prevent. Clark's voice hardened. This isn't about catching anyone doing something wrong. It's about finding systemic problems before they cost lives. Kate thought about the SEAL lieutenant's skepticism, about Hawthorne's dismissal, about 18 years of watching good people die because of failures in communication and coordination. What would this assignment entail? You'd return to Oceana as an observer. Officially, you'd be conducting an after-action review of base operations for a Pentagon efficiency study. You'd have access to briefings, to training exercises, to personnel. You'd watch, listen, and report to me weekly. The assignment would last through the completion of Crosswind. And after? That depends on what we find. But I can promise you this won't end in a recruiting office in Richmond. Kate stared at the folder on Clark's desk. This wasn't what she'd expected. It wasn't what she wanted. But it was a chance to matter again, to contribute to something that might actually save lives. When would I start? Today. There's a flight to Norfolk in 3 hours. I'll have your observer credentials ready before you leave. She should have asked more questions. Should have thought it through more carefully. But sitting in that Pentagon office, Kate Morrison was tired of thinking and second-guessing and wondering if she'd ever feel useful again. I'll do it. Sir, the smile Clark gave her wasn't entirely comforting. Good, because there's one more thing you should know. We have reason to believe there's going to be a critical failure during Crosswind. Something that will expose exactly the kind of integration problems we're worried about. Your job is to be there when it happens and document everything. You know something's going to go wrong and you're not stopping it? We know something might go wrong. We don't know what, when, or how. And we need to see how the system responds under real stress. That's the only way to fix it. He handed her the folder. Your briefing materials. Memorize them on the flight. And Lieutenant Commander? Be careful. The people you're observing won't know your real purpose. To them, you'll just be an unwanted observer getting in the way. They won't make it easy. Kate took the folder and left the Pentagon with her head spinning. 4 hours later, she was back at Oceana, checking into a temporary quarters, building and trying to process the abrupt reversal of her situation. Her new credentials identified her as Personnel Evaluation, Officer Pentagon Operations Review. It was bureaucratic enough to be boring and vague enough to be threatening. Perfect for making everyone uncomfortable. The next morning, she attended her first briefing as an observer. The reaction was immediate. Eyes tracked her as she entered. Conversations paused. When she took a seat in the back, she could feel the resentment radiating from every corner of the room. Admiral Hawthorne looked like he'd swallowed something bitter when he saw her. After the briefing, he cornered her in the hallway. I don't know what strings you pulled in Washington, he said quietly, but don't think this changes anything. You're an observer. That means you watch and stay out of the way. I don't want you interfering with my operation. Understood, sir? Do you? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like an end run around my authority. Like you couldn't handle being reassigned, so you went crying to someone at the Pentagon. The accusation stung because part of her wondered if he was right. But she kept her voice level. I'm following my orders, Admiral. Just like you taught me. His jaw worked. Stay out of my way, Lieutenant Commander. Over the next week, Kate learned exactly how unwelcome an observer could be. Officers stopped talking when she approached. Training exercises were suddenly rescheduled without notice. Her requests for documentation were delayed or ignored. The SEAL operators, in particular, treated her like infection necessary to tolerate. But only barely. The young lieutenant, whose name she learned was Danny Kovac, seemed to take personal pleasure in making her job difficult. When she tried to observe a planning session for a maritime insertion exercise, he questioned her clearance. When she asked about communication protocols, he gave her answers that were technically correct but practically useless. You know, he said after one particularly frustrating exchange, Most Pentagon observers actually understand the operations they're reviewing. Maybe you should stick to what you know. Which is... What, exactly? His teammates laughed. Kate wrote it all down in her reports to Clark, but she also watched and learned. She saw how the aviators and ground operators talked past each other in briefings. She noticed the way critical information got lost in translation between air and surface units. She documented near misses and communication failures that everyone else seemed to accept as normal. As she waited for the critical failure Clark had mentioned. The one that would expose everything. It came on day 12 of Operation Crosswind, during a night training exercise that was supposed to be routine. The mission brief was standard. SEAL team operators would conduct a simulated hostage rescue at a target building in the training complex. Marine recon would provide ground security. Naval aviators would provide close air support and extraction support if needed. Weather was clear. Risk level was low. Kate observed the planning session from her usual corner seat. Lieutenant Kovac was leading the SEAL element, and his confidence bordered on cockiness as he outlined their approach. "We'll insert via Zodiac at the northern beach," he explained, pointing to the map. 2 teams. Alpha will breach and secure the objective. Bravo will hold the perimeter. Air support maintains position overhead, but stays high and quiet. We don't need them unless something goes catastrophically wrong, which it won't. Commander Sullivan, representing the aviation element, frowned. Define high and quiet. 20,000 feet. Weapons cold unless we call for immediate support. That's too high for effective close air support. If you need us, we can't respond fast enough from that altitude. Tovac's smile was patronizing. "Commander, with respect, we've done this 100 times. We don't need aviators holding our hands. Stay high, stay quiet, and let us do our job." Kate saw Sullivan bite back a response. The tension was obvious, but no one intervened. Admiral Hawthorne, observing from the front of the room, nodded approval of the plan. The exercise was scheduled for 0200 hours. Kate arrived at the operations center at midnight, finding it humming with controlled activity. Multiple screens showed live feeds from drones, night vision cameras, and aircraft systems. The operations officer, a weathered lieutenant commander named Patricia Moss, acknowledged Kate's presence with barely a nod. "You're here to observe, not participate," Moss reminded her. "Touch nothing. Say nothing. Just watch." Kate took her position and watched as the operation unfolded. On the screens, she could see the SEAL teams moving through the dark water in their Zodiac boats, thermal signatures showing them as bright shapes against the cool ocean. Above them, 2 FA-18s circled at 20,000 feet, their pilots checking in periodically with board professionalism. The teams hit the beach right on schedule. Alpha Team moved toward the target building while Bravo established a perimeter. Everything proceeded exactly as planned. Then the screens showed something unexpected. Multiple thermal signatures appearing from the tree line near the target building. The exercise was supposed to be controlled. Opposing forces were expected, but they were supposed to be clearly marked and limited. These signatures were neither. Kate leaned forward, studying the feeds. Something was wrong. On the radio, Kovac's voice crackled through. "Contact. Multiple unknown personnel near the objective. Request identification." The operations officer frantically checked a roster. "Kovac, be advised, those personnel are not part of the exercise. Stand by for confirmation." "Standing by." "They're moving toward our position. We need identification now." Kate's eyes moved between screens. The unidentified personnel were spreading out, moving with purpose. Their behavior didn't match training opposition. It looked tactical, aggressive. On another screen, she could see the FA-18s maintaining their high-altitude position, circling uselessly. Admiral Hawthorne had arrived in the operations center, his face tense. "Who authorized additional personnel in the training area?" "No one, sir," Moss replied. "We're checking with base security now." But Kate's attention was on something else. One of the drone feeds showed the tree line more clearly, and she spotted what looked like an unauthorized boat at the adjacent dock. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't part of any exercise. On the radio, "Shots fired. Shots fired. We're taking real fire." The operations center exploded into chaos. Hawthorne was shouting orders. Moss was trying to coordinate with base security. The SEAL teams were calling for immediate support while trying to fall back to defensive positions. "Get those FA-18s down now," Hawthorne ordered, but Kate was already seeing the problem. The aviators were too high, too far away. It would take them precious minutes to descend, acquire targets, and engage. Minutes the SEALs on the ground didn't have. On the screens, she could see muzzle flashes. See the SEAL teams pinned down. See everything Clark had warned her about playing out in real time. The communication failures, the integration problems. The assumptions that fell apart under real stress. Commander Sullivan's voice came over the radio. "Our FRS A-18 already starting its descent. Ground units, be advised. We are descending to support altitude. 8A to engagement position is 4 minutes. 4 minutes." Kate watched the screens and knew it wouldn't be fast enough. The teams on the ground were in serious trouble, and by the time air support could effectively engage, people might be dead. Lieutenant Kavak's voice came through, strained now. "We need help now. We've got wounded and we're surrounded." Kate found herself moving toward the communications panel before she consciously made the decision. Operations Officer Moss blocked her path. "Observer. That means observe. Those men are going to die. We have it under control." But they didn't. Kate could see it on every screen, hear it in every radio transmission. The system was failing exactly the way Clark had predicted, and she was standing there watching it happen. Admiral Hawthorne turned, his face furious. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, stand down." Kate looked at him, at the screens, at the chaos unfolding. Every regulation, every protocol, every rule she'd followed for 18 years told her to step back, to observe, to let the people in charge handle it. But every instinct she'd developed over those same 18 years screamed that people were about to die unnecessarily. She pushed past Moss and grabbed a radio headset. "Hawthorne, I said stand down." Hawthorne's voice cut through the operations center. "Security, remove Lieutenant Commander Morrison from this facility." 2 security personnel moved toward her. Kate stood frozen, the headset in her hand, watching the screens as the situation deteriorated. The SEALs were completely pinned down now. The FA-18s were still 2 minutes from effective engagement range. General Vance appeared in the operations center doorway. Kate hadn't even known she was on base. "Everyone stop," Vance said quietly. The authority in her voice was absolute. Everyone, including Hawthorne, froze. Vance walked to Kate. "You've been observing this operation, Lieutenant Commander. You've seen something we're missing." "What is it?" Kate pointed to the drone feed. "That boat at the dock. It's not part of the exercise, and it's their extraction point. They came in by water, probably thought the area was clear. They're not hostiles, they're lost. Probably civilian contractors working on the base perimeter security upgrades, but nobody coordinated timing." Vance studied the screen, then looked at Hawthorne. "Is that possible?" Hawthorne's face was red. "It doesn't matter what they are. We have personnel under fire. It matters because it changes the response," Kate said. "Those aren't trained combatants. They're contractors who panicked when armed SEALs appeared, and now everyone's shooting at each other in the dark. If we bring in close air support with weapons hot, we could kill innocent people. Then what do you suggest?" Vance asked. Kate looked at the screens again, her mind racing through options. We need someone who can get overhead fast, assess the actual situation, and coordinate a stand down before someone dies. We need high speed and precision. Our FA-18s are already descending, Hawthorne said. Too slow and too loud. By the time they're in position, this will already be over, one way or another. Kate turned to Vance. Ma'am, what assets do you have available? Vance's eyes narrowed. Then understanding crossed her face. I have one asset. But it's not officially part of this exercise. What asset? Hawthorne demanded. General Vance pulled out her phone and made a call. Ghost, this is Vance. I need you airborne in 5 minutes. Full stealth configuration. Stand by for coordinates. She hung up and looked at Kate. You better be right about this. The operations center fell silent except for the radio chatter from the pinned SEAL teams. Everyone stared at the screens, waiting. 3 minutes later, a new icon appeared on the tracking display. Moving fast. Very fast. What is that? Hawthorne asked. Vance smiled slightly. That, Admiral, is an F-22 Raptor. And its pilot is about to show you what real close air support looks like. The F-22 came in so fast and quiet that the first indication anyone on the ground had of its presence was when it lit up the entire training area with its targeting systems. Kate watched on the screens as the Raptor dropped from altitude, positioning itself perfectly overhead with precision that seemed almost impossible. A new voice came over the radio, calm, professional, female. Ground teams. This is Ghost. I have visual on your position and the opposing force. Weapons are cold. Repeat, weapons are cold. Stay in position and stand by. Lieutenant Kovac's voice came back, breathless. Ghost? Who the hell is Ghost? We need immediate fire support. Negative. You need assessment and de-escalation. Give me 30 seconds. Kate watched as the F-22 descended even lower, using its advanced sensor suite to map the entire situation. The jet moved with an elegance that made the F-18s look clumsy by comparison. Operations, this is Ghost. I confirm Lieutenant Commander Morrison's assessment. I count 7 civilian contractors, 3 with weapons, 4 unarmed. They're backed against a dock with their hands up now that they can see me overhead. This is not a hostile force. Recommend immediate stand down in coordination with base security to resolve peacefully. Admiral Hawthorne grabbed a radio. Ghost, identify yourself. A pause. Then, call sign Ghost. Currently attached to Air Force Special Operations for training evaluation. General Vance authorized my participation. I authorized observation, not intervention, Hawthorne snapped. What's your actual name? Another pause, longer this time. Kate saw General Vance's expression, something between amusement and concern. Then the voice came back, and Kate heard something in it that made her breath catch. A tone she recognized. An edge of barely contained steel. Admiral, my name is Captain Laura Mitchell, but maybe you remember my previous call sign better. Before I transferred to the Air Force and the F-22 program, I flew FA-18s out of Oceania. They called me Reaper. The operations center went absolutely silent. Kate felt like she'd been punched. Reaper. Everyone who'd been stationed at Oceania in the past decade knew that call sign. The pilot who'd flown more combat missions than anyone in her squadron, who'd saved an entire Marine platoon with close air support under impossible conditions, who'd left the Navy 6 years ago under circumstances no one talked about. Admiral Hawthorne's face had gone pale. That's impossible. Is it, sir? Because I remember you. You were my squadron commander back then. You wrote the report that led to my transfer out of naval aviation. Something about me being difficult to work with and not a team player. Sound familiar? On the screens, Kate watched the F-22 circle lazily overhead, a predator that had complete control of the situation. You grounded me for 2 weeks because I refused to falsify a maintenance report to protect your performance numbers, Captain Mitchell continued, her voice still calm but with an undertone that could cut steel. Then you recommended my transfer when I filed a formal complaint. The Navy accepted your recommendation. The Air Force didn't ask too many questions. And now here I am, flying a jet that's worth more than your entire air wing, doing the job your current aviators couldn't do because they were too high and too slow to matter. Lieutenant Kovac's voice broke in. Ghost. Reaper, whoever you are, we still have a situation here. Negative, Lieutenant. You had a situation. Now you have 7 terrified contractors who are following my instructions to lay down their weapons and sit on the ground with their hands visible. Base security is inbound. Your teams are no longer in danger. Stand down and let the adults handle this. The rebuke was gentle but devastating. Kate could see the SEAL operators on the thermal feeds lowering their weapons, confused and embarrassed. Ghost. This is Commander Sullivan. Thank you for the assist. That was impressive flying. Thank you, Commander. Though honestly, this was barely worth taking off for. If your Admiral hadn't insisted on keeping you at 20,000 feet, you could have handled this yourself. You're better than he lets you be. Kate saw Sullivan's expression in the reflection of a monitor surprise, gratitude, and something like vindication. General Vance took the radio from Hawthorne's frozen grip. Ghost, nicely done. Return to base for debrief. Negative, ma'am. Request permission for one more thing first. Granted. The F-22 on the screens descended even lower, and Kate realized it was heading toward the flight line. The jet came in for a landing so smooth, it looked like a video game rendering. Perfect touchdown. Perfect rollout. Operations, this is Ghost. I'm taxiing to the visitor parking area. I'd like to address the personnel involved in tonight's exercise. In person, Hawthorne found his voice. Absolutely not. You're not authorized to. She's authorized by me, General Vance interrupted. Everyone involved in tonight's exercise, report to the main briefing hall in 30 minutes. That's an order. 45 minutes later, Kate sat in that same briefing hall she'd left just weeks ago, watching it fill with personnel. The SEAL teams came in still wearing their tactical gear, looking shaken and angry. The FAA-18 pilots arrived, confused about what was happening. Marine recon operators, base. Security personnel, operations staff, everyone who'd been part of the exercise filed in with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Admiral Hawthorne stood at the front, his jaw tight. General Vance stood beside him, arms crossed. Kate remained in her corner seat, trying to process everything that had happened. The room fell silent when Captain Lavra Mitchell walked in. She was smaller than Kate. Expected maybe 5'6" in her flight suit with dark hair pulled back in a regulation, bun and eyes that seemed to catalog everything. With a single glance, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. On her shoulder, the subdued patch of Air Force Special Operations. On her chest, more ribbons than most people earned in a full career. She walked to the front of the room and stood beside Vance, scanning the assembled personnel with an expression that was unreadable. My name is Captain Laura Mitchell, she began. Call sign Ghost. Before that, call sign Reaper. Some of you know who I am. Most of you don't. Tonight, I was overhead when your training exercise turned into a near disaster. General Vance has asked me to explain what happened and why it matters. She pulled up the tactical display on the main screen, showing the sequence of events from the drone feeds. At 0217 hours, SEAL team operators encountered unexpected personnel in their training area. Within 90 seconds, shots were fired. By 0220, you had multiple wounded and a tactical situation that was spiraling out of control. Your air support was 3.5 minutes away from being able to effectively engage. Question: why were they so far away? Lieutenant Kovac raised his hand. Because we requested high altitude. We didn't think we'd need close support. You didn't think you'd need it, so you pushed your air assets too far away to help when you did need them. That's the first failure. Communication and planning. Mitchell advanced the timeline. Second failure. When things went wrong, your communication protocols broke down. Ground teams were calling for immediate support. Air teams were descending, but couldn't get clear information about what they were engaging. Nobody had a complete picture of the battlefield. She looked directly at Admiral Hawthorne. Third failure. Command structure. Your operations center had multiple people trying to take control, nobody coordinating effectively, and one person who actually understood what was happening being ordered to stand down. Kate felt every eye in the room, turned toward her briefly before returning to Mitchell. The only reason nobody died tonight is because General Vance had an asset in place that could respond fast, enough to assess and de-escalate. That asset happened to be an F-22 Raptor with capabilities far beyond what you're used to. But here's what you need to understand. You shouldn't have needed me. Your own people, with your own equipment, should have been able to handle this. Commander Sullivan raised her hand. Captain, with respect, we were following standard protocols. High altitude until needed to avoid detection during the SEAL insertion. Standard protocols that assume everything goes according to plan, Mitchell countered. How often does everything go according to plan in combat? The protocols are designed to avoid risk, not to handle real situations. And that's the fundamental problem I've observed not just tonight, but throughout this entire exercise. She turned to face the SEAL operators. Lieutenant Kovac, you told your air support to stay high and quiet, because you didn't think you'd need them. That tells me you see aviators as backup, not as integrated partners. When's the last time you actually trained with your air support? When's the last time you sat down with a pilot and talked through real scenarios? Kovac's face reddened. We coordinate through operations. Through intermediaries. Not face-to-face. Not building the kind of trust that matters when bullets start flying. Mitchell's voice hardened slightly. Let me tell you what that costs. In 2019, I was flying close air support for a Marine unit outside Kandahar. They got hit hard, pinned down, taking casualties. They called for support. I was 8 minutes away at high altitude. 8 minutes doesn't sound like much until you're counting wounded Marines bleeding out. The room was absolutely silent now. I broke every protocol in the book. Pushed my jet past stress limits. Came in so low and fast that I had enemy fire tracking me. Put ordnance danger close to friendly positions because the Marines on the ground trusted me to be precise. We saved 18 lives that day. The Navy gave me a medal and then grounded me for 2 weeks because I'd violated safety protocols. She looked at Hawthorne again, and then recommended my transfer because I couldn't follow orders. Hawthorne's expression was stone. Captain, that operation was investigated. You endangered yourself, and I saved 18 Marines. Mitchell interrupted, her voice cutting through his words like a blade. 18 Marines who are alive today because I was close enough and trusted enough to act. That's what integrated operations actually means. Not keeping everyone at safe distances and coordinating through radio calls, but being close enough, trained enough, and trusted enough to act when seconds matter. She turned back to the assembled personnel. Tonight exposed every weakness in how this base runs joint operations. Your aviators are too far from ground operators. Your SEAL teams don't trust air support. Your command structure fractures under stress. And when someone tries to speak up, they get silenced. Kate felt Mitchell's eyes land on her briefly. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morrison spent weeks observing this exercise. She documented communication failures, integration problems, and command issues. Tonight, she was the only person in that operations center who correctly assessed what was happening and tried to act on it. She was ordered to stand down by an admiral who couldn't see past his own protocols. Hawthorne stepped forward, his face flushed. "Captain Mitchell, you're out of line. This is a Navy base, and I won't have you. You'll have me finish," Vance said quietly, her general's rank suddenly filling every inch of the room. "Because I asked her to speak, and because the Pentagon is very interested in her assessment. Continue, Captain." Mitchell nodded. "Here's what's going to happen. Over the next week, every SEAL team operator on this base is going to spend time with aviators. Not in briefing rooms, in cockpits, in mission planning, building actual relationships. Every pilot is going to spend time with ground operators, learning what they face, understanding their needs. You're going to redo your communication protocols from scratch with input from everyone involved. And you're going to figure out how to operate as an actual team instead of separate units that happen to work in the same space." She paused. "And if anyone has a problem with that, you can take it up with General Vance, who has full authority from the Secretary of Defense to restructure this training program however she sees fit." Lieutenant Kovac raised his hand slowly. "Captain, earlier tonight, when you said your call sign was Ghost, some of us looked it up. You've got classified missions we can't even read about. Multiple combat decorations. You've flown operations we didn't know were possible. Why are you here? Why do you care about how we run training exercises?" Mitchell's expression softened slightly. "Because 6 years ago, I was exactly where Lieutenant Commander Morrison is now. Pushed out for not fitting in. For being difficult. For expecting standards that made people uncomfortable. The Navy didn't want me, so the Air Force took me. And I've spent the last 6 years proving that the problem wasn't me. It was a system that punishes excellence when it doesn't. Look the way they expect." She gestured too. "Kate, Lieutenant Commander Morrison is one of the best tactical minds I've seen in 20 years of military service. Her performance record is flawless. Her insights are valuable. And she was being transferred to a recruiting office in Richmond because she made an admiral uncomfortable. That's not just wrong, it's wasteful and dangerous. How many other good people have you pushed out? How many more lives could we save if we actually listened to the people who see problems instead of silencing them?" The room remained silent. Kate felt something breaking open inside her chest validation. She hadn't realized she needed so desperately. Hawthorne looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Captain, the decisions I made regarding personnel were based on performance evaluations and politics. And comfort. And maintaining a culture that values compliance over competence." Mitchell's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "Admiral, you're not a bad officer. You're a product of a system that rewards the wrong things. But that system is changing. Tonight is the beginning of that change." General Vance stepped forward. "Admiral Hawthorne, effective immediately. You're relieved of oversight for Operation Crosswind. Captain Mitchell will assume command of the training integration, reporting directly to me. Lieutenant Commander Morrison will serve as her second-in-command, with full authority to implement whatever changes they deem necessary." Hawthorne opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded stiffly. "Yes, ma'am." Vance turned to the assembled personnel. "The next 2 weeks of this exercise will look very different. You'll be working harder, training smarter, and learning to actually trust each other. Anyone who has a problem with that can request transfer. Anyone who embraces it will be part of building the future of joint operations. Dismissed. The room emptied slowly. SEAL operators walked past Kate, several nodding with something that looked like respect. Commander Sullivan stopped to squeeze her shoulder. "Glad you're staying," she murmured. When most people had left, Kate approached Captain Mitchell, who was gathering her notes. "Captain, I don't know what to say." Mitchell looked up. "Don't say anything. Just be ready to work. We have 2 weeks to fix 18 years of broken culture. It won't be easy. Why did you do this? You didn't have to speak up for me." "Yes, I did." Mitchell's eyes met hers directly. "Because 6 years ago, nobody spoke up for me. I walked away from the Navy, thinking I was the problem. Spent 2 years questioning every decision I'd ever made. Then I got to the Air Force and realized the problem was never me. It was a system that didn't know what to do with women who refused to shrink. I swore if I ever had the chance to change that system, I would. Tonight was that chance." Kate felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "Thank you. Thank me by being brilliant. By proving that Hawthorne's biggest mistake wasn't pushing you out. It was not recognizing what he had when you were right there." Mitchell smiled slightly. "Also, I read your observation reports. Your analysis of the communication protocol failures was exceptional. We're going to use it as the foundation for the new training structure." Over the next 2 weeks, Kate Morrison worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She and Captain Mitchell restructured every aspect of the joint training program. SEAL operators spent hours in flight simulators, learning what pilots actually saw and dealt with. Aviators went through abbreviated ground tactics training, understanding what operators faced. Communication protocols were rebuilt from scratch, eliminating layers of bureaucracy that slowed critical decisions. Lieutenant Kovac, to his credit, threw himself into the new program. During one training session, sitting in an F-18 simulator next to Commander Sullivan, Kate heard him say quietly, "I didn't understand. How fast things happen, how much you're managing, how much we depend on you." "I'm sorry." Sullivan's response was gracious. "Now you know. Let's make sure it matters." The final exercise of Operation Crosswind was scheduled for the last night. It was the same scenario as before: maritime insertion, hostage rescue, close air support. But everything else was different. Kate stood in the operations center watching the screens. Captain Mitchell was overhead in her F-22, but this time she was coordinating, not rescuing. The F-18s were at proper support altitude, close enough to respond, but high enough to maintain operational flexibility. The SEAL teams in air support were communicating directly, clearly, with mutual respect evident in every transmission. When the exercise hit its planned complication simulated enemy reinforcements, the response was seamless. Ground teams called for support with precise coordinates. Air support acknowledged and engaged within 90 seconds. Communication was clear. Trust was evident. The operation succeeded perfectly. In the operations center, General Vance turned to Kate. "That's what right looks like, Lieutenant Commander. You helped build that." 3 days later, Kate Morrison sat in General Vance's temporary office for a final debrief. "The Pentagon has reviewed the results of Operation Crosswind," Vance said. "Your recommendations are being implemented Navy-wide. Captain Mitchell is being assigned to develop a permanent joint integration training program. And you've been offered a choice." Kate waited. "You can return to your squadron here at Oceana, with a formal commendation and a promotion to commander under consideration. Or," Vance slid a folder across the desk, "you can join Captain Mitchell's team at the Pentagon. Help her build this program properly. Make sure what happened to both of you never happens to anyone else." Kate opened the folder, scanning the assignment details. Pentagon, advisory role, Real influence over how the military trained its people. And Admiral Hawthorne? She asked, is being reassigned to a position more suited to his strengths. He's not a bad officer, Kate, but he's not the right officer for that command. Sometimes, the system puts people in positions where their limitations cause more harm than good. We're correcting that. Kate looked at the two paths in front of her. Return to flying, to the squadron, to the life she'd built. Or step into something new, something that might actually change things for people who came after her. Can I ask Captain Mitchell's opinion? Vance smiled. She said you'd ask that. She also said she'd tell you to fly, that you're too good a pilot to waste behind a desk, but that if you chose to join her team anyway, she'd be honored to serve with you. Kate thought about her father, about 18 years of service, about standing in Admiral Hawthorne's office, feeling like everything she'd worked for was ending, about Captain Mitchell's voice over the radio, calm and competent and refusing to be silenced. I'll join Captain Mitchell's team, she said. Someone needs to make sure the next generation doesn't have to fight the battles we fought. And I can always fly. But this chance to actually fix things, I might not get that again. Vance nodded, looking satisfied. Then welcome to Pentagon Operations, Commander Morrison. Your promotion is effective immediately. You've earned it. 6 months later, Kate Morrison stood in front of an auditorium at the Naval Academy, speaking to a class of soon-to-be officers. Captain Laura Mitchell sat in the front row, having given her own presentation earlier. The call sign Ghost used to mean something different, Kate told the young faces looking up at her. It meant someone who'd been erased, forgotten, pushed out. But Captain Mitchell took that name and made it mean something else. Someone who moves through systems they don't expect, who sees things others miss, who refuses to be silenced even when everything tells them to be quiet. She paused, looking at the young women scattered through the audience. Some of you will face what we faced. You'll be told you're difficult, or you don't fit, or you're not what they're looking for. And you'll have a choice. You can change yourself to fit a system that doesn't value you. Or you can change the system. The second option is harder, Captain Mitchell added from her seat. It's lonely. It costs you things. But it's worth it. Because every system you change, every protocol you improve, every person you speak up for, that's lives saved. That's people who come after you having an easier path. That's what service actually means. After the presentation, a young woman approached Kate nervously. Commander Morrison? I'm a senior, about to commission. And I'm scared. What if I'm not good enough? What if they're right when they say I don't fit? Kate thought about Admiral Hawthorne's office, about the recruiting office in Richmond, about standing in an operations center watching people suffer because the system valued protocol over people. They won't be right, Kate said firmly. They'll be comfortable. There's a difference. Don't confuse their comfort with your worth. And when they try to silence you, remember, you have a voice for a reason. Use it. The young woman nodded, blinking back tears, and walked away with her spine a little straighter. Captain Mitchell came to stand beside Kate. Think we made a difference? With her? Maybe. With the system? That's going to take time. We've got time, Mitchell said. And now we've got each other. That's more than we had before. They walked out of the academy together. Two women who'd refused to be ghosts, who'd turned their call signs into something that meant strength instead of erasure. Behind them, in the auditorium, young officers filed out carrying the knowledge that excellence didn't mean silence, and that the system could be changed by people brave enough to try. Above them, an F-22 Raptor flew overhead, sunlight glinting off its wings. Ghost flight, heading home. The end.